if you're searching for a seat, there's more seating in the dining area, the tables and chairs right next door.
Good afternoon. We're going to get started. I know there's a lot of people coming in still. There's room out there, and I think the video is going. If you don't know who I am Mike Friesen. I am Rhonda's brother and Greg's brother. My job is to keep it happy. So there you go. In typical Greg fashion, this is a packed house, which is amazing. It says a lot about Greg. I couldn't fill 3 rows of this. So just so fun to have everybody here. We're so thankful for all of you. And it's just incredible to see what Greg's life meant to people beyond our family. And he's just impacted so many people. So our goal today is to actually celebrate Greg's life. There's a couple things that I'll mention a couple different times. The first one is we want to hear stories of Greg. They don't have to be appropriate. They can be. There's a room just outside and to the left, and there's signs to get there, video. There's a microphone in there with a camera just rolling. Please go share stories. Share stories so that we can go back and watch all the things that happened with Greg and you. It will be a great way to remember him. Obviously, we're here and in a bit of disbelief and shock. But our hope is that we can share stories. We can talk about how he's impacted all of us while we're celebrating. And obviously, for all of those that are going to get up here and speak, it is what it is. So we can feel free to use our emotions, however that is. That's celebration still. So for all of us that have to worry about standing up here in front of all of you, it's okay. Come share stories. Come remember Greg. One thing that I want to share is, for me, one of the things that I love about Greg is he was the same person for everybody in this room. He didn't have 2 personalities. He didn't have anything that he changed based on who you were or where you were from or anything like that. He was appropriate or inappropriate. It didn't matter who you were. And I think that as you hear stories of Greg and his interactions with everybody's going to be able to relate to those things because it was the same with everybody. It was one of the things that made him so lovable, sometimes infuriating, sometimes all the things, but he was just a special person in all of our lives. He was generous with his time, he's generous with his resources, and most importantly, he was generous with his love. One story I wanted to share was when I was, if you didn't know this, I'm a women's soccer coach at San Diego State, and when I was interviewing for the job, obviously a very stressful time in my life and my family's life, and we waited for days and days to get the word back whether I would get the job. And the moment I got the job, Greg loaded up his whole family and drove to San Diego. He showed up whenever, wherever, for whoever. And that was so important to not only me and my family, but to all of you. We've heard so many stories of how he just showed up and cared about people. That's one of the things that I want to make sure that I remember to live like he lived, which is just generous in every way. He was hilarious, sometimes intentionally. The story that always pops in my mind is our family took a trip to Mexico. We went to this great place, had a great time all day long, and we had to get on this rickety bus and go back to our hotel. And as only Greg could do, he's wearing flip-flops and starts to get off the bus. His flip-flop folds under, and he slices his foot wide open on the white marble outside of the hotel and just is bleeding everywhere. Which you maybe don't think that's funny, but in our family, the Friesens, our reaction is that's hilarious. And so we pointed and laughed and cried as a guy with one glove smeared his blood all around. And Greg was just like, you guys think this is hilarious? I'm bleeding everywhere. So we think he's just, there's such a hole that we're going to have in anything we do because he was just so fun to be around. He brought life to every single moment. He's also good at making fun of people. And so I like to prod him a little bit. One time we went to Disneyland when our kids were really little, and my mom was there, and she had this silver hat on, and we were all giving her a hard time about it. And we were poking fun at her, and then Greg finally chimed in and was like, "Oh, that's Jiffy Pop hat." And my mom turned and let him have it. And we just walked off and just thought that was a hilarious moment. So we always have laughed about things like that, but he was just that personality that was always engaging, always fun to be around. Every time he left my house from vacation, he always stole something, usually unintentionally, and he'd get about halfway to Sacramento, and then he'd call and be like, "Oh, I thought these were my sunglasses. They were yours." And so then he would have Rhonda send them back in the mail, which is special. This last few months has been pretty difficult for us. It's been a struggle. And a couple weeks ago, we were in Phoenix in hospice, and I had to fly back to San Diego to do a camp and had to say goodbye. And he just looked at me and said, "Brother, I love you." And even though we weren't actual brothers, he became my brother. And he treated me like his brother. And I'm so grateful for what he's been for our family, how he's been for my sister, and the impact he's had on my life, my kids' lives, my wife, our whole family. We're going to miss him immensely. I think the hard part is that we can't really comprehend right now what this hole in our life is going to be, and we know it's going to be difficult. But one thing we want to make sure we do is continue to live the way he wanted us all to live. He wouldn't want us to be here and sad. He wants a party. And so we're so excited that everybody's here to celebrate him. We're so thankful for all you. Our family has a saying that is, "Joy is a choice." It's usually said out of somebody that's complaining and being a big pain in the butt of joy is a choice. But really, we choose joy in the midst of hard circumstances, and that's today. We're choosing it. So we're going to have lots of people come up and speak about Greg. We hope you all can relate to the things that we're saying. We love Greg with all of our hearts. He's been such a special part of our lives, and we're so thankful for all of you to come here and celebrate.
Hi, my name is Jamie Friesen, and I had the privilege of being Greg's sister-in-law. Gregory Wayne Jaggers began causing mischief and mayhem on November 5th, 1971 in Sacramento, California. Born to Jim and Darlene Jaggers, Greg quickly teamed up with his older brother Jim to bring laughter, shenanigans, and I'm guessing their fair share of headaches to their family and friends. Greg attended Fremont and Pioneer Elementary and Foothill Junior High, and later Foothill High School, where he played football. Now, to me, Greg always talked a big game about his football career, but I'm doubtful. And one morning when Mike and I were visiting Rhonda and Greg, we went to a workout class, and part of the workout, we had to run down the block, and we couldn't find Greg. And we looked around, and he was hiding behind a car because he said, "I don't run." And I played college basketball, and Greg would always tell me, "Oh, you could take me one-on-one." And the first time we actually played, I was amazed someone could miss the basket by that wide of a margin. And all four limbs were going in four different directions, which is impressive of itself. Greg graduated in 1990, and right out of high school, he worked as a behavioral aide at Alicante School and took an interest in the business and administrative side of education. He rose up through the ranks of non-public school and became vice president and then executive director of Triad Family Services, and later moved into working in mergers and acquisitions through a public company in the behavioral health field. Greg became a relationship manager at Providence Service Corp, which blended his skills of building relationships and connecting people. He then went out on his own and did side-by-side representation in the behavioral health field, representing companies that wanted to buy foster care and mental health facilities. In 2007, he recognized changes coming in the financial and educational landscape, and he and Rhonda purchased what is now Point Quest Group. Point Quest was formed June 18, 2008, and he spent the next 14 years building a company providing services to at-risk youth. In 2022, Point Quest was acquired by Avesti Partners, where Greg continued to be passionate about mergers, acquisitions, and seeing the original mission of Point Quest come to life across the country. For all of his accomplishments and talent growing businesses, Greg's original passion was always loving and helping kids. From his first days as an aide working one-on-one with troubled students to his time leading large organizations, Greg consistently said, "The day I don't love these kids is the day I need to leave the business." Greg loved the puzzle of building a business and connecting people, and the fact that he could marry his two passions, helping and serving kids who needed it, plus the vision and execution of building corporate structures, and that combination proved to be remarkably successful. But for all of his professional achievements, Greg's first love has always been his family. Greg married Michelle Antrobus when he was 21 and had two sons, Ben and Michael. He loved being a dad and teaching those boys his mischievous ways. Greg's second marriage to Rhonda added another son, Grayson, and created a house full of noise and hijinks. A year after Greg and Rhonda formed Point Quest, Greg's oldest son, Ben, passed away at 12 years old. Greg modeled, when the horrible and unexpected happen, we can continue living, holding grief, while still living life to the fullest. That example is even more meaningful today as we navigate this. Greg was a fabulous husband, father, son, grandson, uncle, brother-in-law, cousin, son-in-law, nephew, and recently grandfather. Being there for and with his family was who he was as a person. He simply showed us how to love by showing up for each of us. Big events, small events, it didn't matter. If it was important to us, it was important to him. And as you all know, his family wasn't just his family. Anyone in his path became important to him, and he loved and treated all of us like family. It was part of who he was and the magic of having Greg in your life. Greg loved traveling, and the location didn't matter as much as who he was with and the experiences. Adventure was made better for Greg because of who he was with. He loved hunting, and that took him all over the world, and we recently began loving fly fishing as well. Greg thrived living in Wyoming and loved being outside, whether with his horses, checking his cattle, shooting coyotes, kayaking, ATVing, and just exploring and fully immersing himself in the wonder of being outside. Greg passed away July 14th and leaves behind a legacy of love, generosity, humor, ambition, and his unique nature of being completely himself in any and all situations, whether or not that was appropriate. The 13th century theologian Thomas Aquinas said, "The things that we love tell us what we are." And if we look at what Greg loved, we see exactly who he was. The reason this room is so full and our hearts are so broken is because he saw people. He championed people. He loved people and loved life. The things he loved, laughter, big dreams, adventure, and all of us, is exactly who he was. One of my overarching memories of Greg is Greg was loud. No matter what he was doing, it was always at volume 10. So many mornings when we'd be visiting Sacramento with Rhonda and Greg, or in Wyoming, or on vacation, we would wake up to Greg's loud stomping throughout the house and yelling at someone or something, and the coffee maker getting turned on. Sometimes all those things at once. He just moved through the world loudly. In Ubers, while on trips, we would make him sit in the front seat, and he was inevitably yelling at the driver, often in an accent that didn't really match the Uber driver. And we'd be sitting in the back seat just laughing and crying at him, trying to make conversation as he yells at this guy. We always knew where Greg was because everything he did was loud. And really, that encapsulates who Greg was and why we all love him. He loved loudly. He gave his time, his resources loudly. He laughed and made us laugh loudly. He dreamed and he schemed loudly. He lived loud. And that's what makes this so hard to face. The silence of a world without Greg is deafening. At his son Ben's funeral, Greg challenged all of us to go do something good in the world to honor Ben. And I want to add to that today. We can honor Greg and celebrate his life by going out and living loudly. Now, none of us are Greg. None of us could ever be. So our loud will each look different. But to go out and live our lives loudly, love people loudly, include that kid or the person who needs it, see someone for who they are, offer help for nothing in return, laugh loudly, laugh often, at ourselves and at one another. We can celebrate Greg, remember him, and pass his legacy on by adding some noise to the world.
I can't believe the number of people that are here from both Greg's and my entire life. It's such an honor and a privilege that you guys showed up. And I've stood in this space, in this building, in this room so many times, talking to so many of you and training so many of you that I thought, I got this. I can talk without an issue. So bear with me because I might have had a little bit of overconfidence when I thought I wanted to say something. But I wanted to share some qualities of my husband that I've been in awe of and that I've thought of this past week and that has helped me to be here today. And he was the most amazing person. He was generous to a fault with his time and with his resources. Every one of you that has reached out to me said the same thing. You said you don't understand everything he did for me. And I don't think Greg understood the impact that he left and what he meant to all of you and the legacy that he leaves, because he was just generous and he loved. He was a visionary and a strategizer. Nothing was too big for Greg's dreams. He always saw the big picture, and not just for now, but for the future. And he loved to strategize on how to get there, not so much in the details. So that was Jason, and I had to wrap up that little bit of information. We're like, this can't be done. He's like, of course it can be done. So I had to learn early in our marriage that Greg thought out loud, and I would get wrapped up. I thought we were talking about a plan and this is what we were going with, but he thought out loud and it went up and down and up and down. And my emotions would be so wrapped into that. And for those of you that know me, I don't do change very well. So this was, a very roller coaster ride for me. Many times we would be lying in bed talking about something that we had to do. And I thought that we were at conclusion and at a plan, and I sleep very well. So I slept very soundly all night long, and I'd wake up and ask Greg, how'd you sleep? And he goes, oh, I didn't sleep at all. And he'd launch into this revised plan and look at me like, why are you not keeping up with me? And it wasn't just that he went from point A to point B. He had turned over every option from point A to point Z in the night. And we had the plan moving forward and catch up because this is how we're going to execute it. So I had to learn that change was a part of our everyday life. My Point Quest people know we talk a lot about change, that change is good, but it's not easy, right? And I had to learn to live that. Greg believed in people. He believed in all of you, always. And he had the ability to talk each of us into believing in ourselves. What an amazing quality that was. Honestly, it's how I've gotten through this last week, that Greg believed I could. And he thought I was strong, and he thought I could do anything. So I'm here, and I'm trying to manifest that strength that he believed in me. But for Greg and I, there was one caveat to that in our personal life, and that was that, he never said no to me. He never said no. He always said, figure out how you can do it. So early in our marriage, we didn't have much, and I wanted a pair of boots. And so he said, figure out how you're going to do that. I'm like, okay. And at the time, you know, our electric bill was about $400 a month. And so I was like, so if I can cut down on the electrical bill for the summer, I will have these boots by the end of the summer. So I bring my new pair of boots in September, and he's like, that's great. How'd you get those? And I'm like, so I told him that I had, you know, turned the air down, or turned the air up actually. And he loves the house like freezing cold. So I just cranked it up a few degrees. My electric bill came down and I got my boots. He was so furious because he thought the air conditioner was going out, and he had been hot all summer long. So our new rule came that you can do anything you want, figure out how you're going to do it, but it can't impact me and it cannot impact our house. So, and many of you are here today and where you are because Greg believed in you. He respected you enough to give you hard messages and helped you expand your lives. And I am so proud of that. Greg loved to laugh. He loved practical jokes. Even when the kids were little and they were fair game, right? He was merciless, and there's many tears in our house for him thinking he could go further than he can. You know, cold water over the shower, and, you know, and kids are 4, 5, 6, right? I mean, not old enough to, and they're, wow, yeah, I can't believe this is happening. And even now, right? I mean, they kind of walk around, you know, when he comes around guarding themselves, and he's like, what? I'm just trying to give you a hug. And his humor wasn't limited to anybody, right? Everybody was fair game. If you met Greg, you were fair game for his practical jokes. Even as a grown man, and you guys know who you are in this room, he would pants people in the most heinous positions, right? In the most heinous locations. And he'd laugh at himself. So Greg and I were a team at work and at life. We spent all our time together. My mom always said that Greg helped me not take myself so seriously. My family jokes that he was my handler. I'm not so sure what I think about that, and the fact that now they think that my son Grayson needs to step in and fill that role. And Greg and I didn't have ups and downs. We had up. It was always up. And there were hard times, and there was lots of stressful times, but we did life together. We didn't fight. We talked a lot. And that's what I'm going to miss. I'm going to miss the talking, the processing, the strategizing, the dreaming, and the adoration that we held for each other. I used to try to be Greg, but he's a force of nature. Nobody can be Greg. So how do we honor his life? We live life to the fullest without fear. We serve others. He loved serving others. He loved serving kids, right? He would come home in his early days when he'd be in juvenile hall, right, and meeting with kids, and he'd come home and he's like, I found a kid I want to bring home. But that was him, right? He loved that. He loved working in our field. He loved working with people. He loved serving others. And he wasn't solemn. You know, we talked a lot about what do we want this day to be like. And Greg wasn't a solemn guy. He was full of life, and he brought us along with him on that ride. Even in the past few months, as he received his diagnosis, he was optimistic. He didn't want to talk about it, and he didn't want to tell anyone until he was on the positive side, because that's who he was. He was full of life and positivity. And he doesn't want us to stop living. He wants us to show him what we are all made of. He believed in us. What a gift he was. And I will love him forever. And I will live my life to make him proud. And I was so privileged to be his wife. What an honor that was. And I am eternally grateful for that. And to my family, thank you so much for carrying me these last few months. Joy's a choice.
My son looked at these glasses and he said, "What's with the leopard print glasses?" And I said, Greg gave them to me. And that was the end of the discussion. So my name is Jason Hall. I'm Greg's cousin, and our moms are sisters. Here go the different last names. But thank you for coming and supporting the family. It's been a total disbelief and shock. I can't even get to the part where I tell you I'm an ugly crier. There'll be no stoic one tear of a manly tear and a stiff chin. It'll be an ugly face crying. Snot nose too, probably. It's been my absolute honor and privilege of knowing Greg for nearly all my life, for all of his life, actually. Greg and I are 5 months apart, and we have been buddies since he was born. I would tease him that I was the older and wiser one, but without admitting to him that he had the hair and the height. Good looks, too. I've always disliked funerals for the obvious reasons, but it seems disingenuous and to try to sum up someone's life, especially someone like Greg, in just a few minutes. And so you all know that there's way more to Greg than we can talk to you about today. And I can do this today, so it'll be all right. I can get through it. But I'm no great orator or storyteller. So my only wish today is that I can convey to you the parts of Greg that we all know and love, and you'll see a theme in what I say today. A lot of it's already been said. One thing I did want to point out today is to look at what Grace and Mike, Rhonda, just look around the room and see the life that Greg built for himself and for all of us. There's a popular country song out right now that it's called Standing Room Only. And the lyrics are, live a life so when you die, there is standing room only. And we can see that Greg lived that life. I had to write it all, and I'm sorry I'm reading, but it is kind of the only way. Greg was a typical boy growing up in the 70s and 80s and was very rambunctious and maybe a little mischievous and reckless, or maybe a lot. I've got my cowboy handkerchief in honor of Greg today, too. Greg loved sports, animals, all things outdoors, and making the most of everyday life. He developed a love of the outdoors when young, primarily going hunting and fishing with me and his uncle, who was my dad. Later in life, Greg became a prolific outdoorsman, far surpassing it as a casual hobby. During his teen years, he pushed the boundaries as many teenagers do. He pushed it so far one time, he was met with the Sacramento County Sheriff's Department in his parents' entryway, and he may or may not have earned himself a pair of silver bracelets out on the front lawn. I think that scared Greg a little bit, and he took it down a notch or two, which he needed to, or else, people like Greg, they either go one way or the other. And I think it was good timing that he got himself in a little bit of trouble and decided maybe he should chill out a little bit. Greg and I spent weeks together in the summer trading houses, me in the country and he in the city. We taught each other about what those lives were like, and he loved it. Me on the city, not so much. During those early years, we all learned that Greg was adventurous, fun-loving, thrill-seeking, creative, and a little reckless at times. But he was dedicated to grabbing life by the horns and making sure that everyone was aware of his presence. Greg tried college for a while, but after a high school career that concentrated in troublemaking, sports, wood shop, metal shop, welding, auto shop, he decided that maybe college was not the route for him. This was at a time in the 80s and 90s where college was seen as the only way to be successful, something that neither he or I agree with anymore. It wasn't for lack of Greg wanting to have a successful college career. He just was not built for that environment. It was way too slow, way too boring, and just way too serious for him. So I think that partly for me, I think that bothered Greg a little bit in his early career. They didn't have the pedigree and the advanced education. But I think that he developed what I call his superpowers, somewhat as a result of that, and the other is just because that's who he was. So I'd like to kind of tell you what I think some of Greg's superpowers were. Sorry, before I do that, I'm going to tell you a little story about Greg. Obviously he found his niche in working with young people. Whether that was in the education system or in the foster care system. He loved interacting with young people ranging from the little kids and all the way through young adults. And I feel Greg was blessed to find something he was energized by and passionate about. Many of the youth that Greg helped were in need of special care and assistance, as many suffer from disabilities of various types, behavior disorders, and in some cases, neglect. There are countless stories, and I know many of you from Point Quest and others know of these stories. The tremendous impact Greg had on so many young people. Greg was not a particularly religious person, but I would say he found joy in doing God's work. I think he would forgive me today for having one scriptural reference. He always forgave me most of the things I did. Partly because he would like this because it was in a war movie that we both liked. It's from the movie Fury. And it's about a tank commander on a mission that ends up to be a bit of a suicide mission in the end. And there's a scene in that movie where things aren't going well and the group is questioning their commitment to this thing they had undertaken. Shia LaBeouf's character is named Bible in the movie, nicknamed Bible, quotes a scripture from Isaiah chapter 6, verse 8, which says, "And I heard the voice of the Lord saying, whom shall I send?" And who will go for us? Then I said, here am I, send me. I think Greg said to the mission of uplifting the youth of our community, here am I, send me. It was Greg's calling in life to be there for other people, to encourage, to support, to cheerlead, to bring a smile, and to make people feel special. One day, Greg and I drove to the Bay Area to look at this school that Point Quest was considering acquiring. And it was summertime, so the classes were out for the most part, but there was a kindergarten class that had a summer program or something. And we were talking to the owner and they were giving us the usual facility tour. And as soon as Greg figured out that there was a kindergarten class on campus, he made a beeline for that class, interrupted it, made a big scene. And this little boy came up to him and they had a great little interaction. And Greg was so happy. Of course, that boy thought he was Gavin Newsom because he said, "Are you Gavin Newsom?" It was COVID and Greg had a long hairstyle that summer. Greg did not like being called Gavin Newsom. I had the absolute privilege of working with Greg and Ron over these last 8 years. Before I started working, though, I thought I knew my cousin really well. So well that Christy and I had to have a serious conversation about whether this was really a good idea or not. And for the record, it was one of the best decisions I've made in my life. It's understandable that I thought I knew my cousin. After all, we'd grown up together, had summer jobs together, vacationed together, got in trouble together, hunted and fished together, celebrated holidays together, kept up on each other's careers and families in our lives up to that point. However, it turns out that there was much more to him than I had known. than I knew. And this is where I like to talk about Greg's superpowers. Some of these have been touched on. Greg had the superpower of creativity and possibility. I learned that Greg was a very creative person and his mind didn't work the way mine did or others. Greg was a visionary leader and one who couldn't be bothered with the details of things. I often said that I told people, because he was a bit of an enigma to people that from a business perspective. And they're like, well, how do you kind of talk to Greg? How do you talk about the things you want to talk about? I said, Greg is a possibilities person. I said, you have to talk to him about big things and you'll get his attention. Greg loved to think and talk about what was possible. Details were just a distraction from passionately following your dreams and vision. Despite mine and others' attempts to rein him in at times, he was not having it. Greg had a superpower of verbal communication. The first years working with Greg, the first year was very chaotic. I mean, for God's sakes, I started out as an accountant, and I'd go to these meetings, and it was just pure chaos. I don't even know what we did. Why did we even have in this meeting? And partly that was because Greg was relationship all the time. It was 100%. I'm trying to get details done. We were in the middle of negotiating something or getting to the bottom of an issue, and he could not stand either the silence or the seriousness of the conversation, and he would blow it up every time. I came to appreciate it later. It's like, none of this stuff is that serious. And the relationships is what was important to him. Greg had the amazing ability to make you think that you were the most important person in the room and that you were part of something bigger. Greg was reassuring you that all would be well and the future was full of potential. Greg had a superpower of being a lifelong learner, which Mike had touched on. He loved to research it all. You could get his attention if he was interested in it. And he would research things, send you things, ask you questions. And part of him asking was like part of his research. He wanted to know what you thought. But he loved everything: economics, business, finance, cattle, dogs, hunting, fishing, guns, healthcare, education, local, national politics, world travel, etc. Except for golf. He hated golf. Greg had a superpower of vision and purpose. I learned that Rhonda touched on this, that Greg spent sleepless nights working out big picture problems for himself, for his family, for his business and his friends. Greg was always focused on the future and creating something bigger and better. Even after Greg had big wins, big wins, like, huge things that would go his way. The next night, I was thinking about this. I'm like, dude, you need to take the win for a bit and relax. I'm tired. Greg spent much of his energy creating a vision for the future that was purposeful and exciting to him. He would spend time speaking on challenges of his friends and his family with the goal of providing them sound advice and offering himself as part of that solution. Another superpower of Greg is his limitless thinking. Greg had no restrictions mindset. Greg knew if someone else had done it or attained it, so could he. He plowed through roadblocks, voices of doubt, naysayers, gatekeepers, and anything in his way. Greg ignored the lack of pedigree and any advanced education and flew right past most of them. Greg couldn't be kept from the things he dreamed of, whether that was his African adventures, becoming a premier cattle rancher in Wyoming, owning a multi-state, multi-million-dollar revenue business, or traveling the world. There was no way you could tell him he couldn't do it. I think most of us have touched on this today, but Greg had a superpower of generosity. Personally, I know that Greg and Rhonda have employed all of my children, my nieces, my in-laws, and I know there are many in this room that he and Rhonda have done the same for. Believe me, he wasn't doing this to make money. It was to give people a chance to offer a hand up, to ease burdens, and to spend time with those he loved. Greg was super generous with his resources. You had perfectly fine equipment, and new equipment would show up at your house. Oh, you need a new, that's not the latest iPhone, you need that, and it would show up at your house. And I know there's countless stories of him doing that for many. Another superpower of Greg is that he loved deeply. Greg loved Rhonda, his boys, Ben, Michael, and Grace, and he loved them all. He would often talk to me about wanting the best for them. And he was tempted to spoil them, but he resisted. He wanted them to be able to grow up and take their place in the world and to earn their way. But he was proud of them all. Greg loved Rhonda completely. We would be gone doing who knows what for multiple days, and many times a day, he would call Rhonda or message her and wanting to make sure everything was okay and that she was good. Rhonda went on many of those adventures with him as well. Greg and Rhonda pulled off what would be considered to be not even a small miracle, a pretty big one, but working together for 17 plus years. I don't know how many in this room thinks they could work with their spouse for 17 years on anything, let alone a business that took all that they had. Another superpower of Greg's was creating community. And partly we see that today with the people in the room from all aspects of his life, whether that was his professional life, his hobbies. Greg created communities that we all wanted to be a part of. And he created the life that he wanted, and that he was inclusive and inviting those that he loved and thought would be interesting or entertaining as well. Greg was adventure seeking. From his youth, he got a little more resources, he had made many once in a lifetime adventures, except he would do them 2 or 3 times. Greg and many times Rhonda traveled the world over to far off places, experiencing all that this world had to offer. I started to create a list. The list was too long, but suffice it to say that Greg lived an adventure-filled life, full of discovery, learning, good times, and making lifelong friends wherever he went. Greg had no intentions of slowing down. He was actively working on the next business ventures. There was at least 4 trips on the books in the upcoming months for high adventure experiences. All his future plans centered around how he could continue to fulfill and embrace life with Rhonda and his family, and how he would continue to positively impact the lives of those around him. I'm sorry, I'm almost done. This is my kind of final thoughts, is that Greg didn't wait until some magic date in the future to start living and to chase his dreams. Greg lived and pursued his dreams, and while his bucket list was very long, it was a revolving list, because he lived life as he went along, not waiting, not delaying, not making excuses. I think if Greg had one thing that he could convey to all of us, it would be to do the same. Don't wait to take that trip. Don't wait to start that business. Don't wait to learn something new. Don't wait to be of service to others. Don't wait until the timing is just right. Don't let anyone tell you that it can't be done. If it's hard, then do it hard. If it's sloppy, do it sloppy. Live life fully, embrace it. Don't let small things like the details control your life story. I don't have the words available to me to express how much I loved and admired my cousin. Nor for the gratitude that I feel for his generosity, for his caring, for his fun-loving and magnetic personality. I'm so grateful for him, for his creativity, his big dreams, and his can-do attitude. I've said so many times this past week that Greg is irreplaceable in our lives, and I know that to be true. There will be a hole in our lives where Greg once filled. He had more to give and more to offer this world, but Greg loved life, his family, and accomplished so much in his 53 years. Excluding my wife and children, he was the most important person in my life. I will love him and miss him. I'm so grateful for the opportunity to have spent so much time with him. We will all miss him every day until we meet him again.
I am a uglier crier. Just want to say that before we get started. And it's more difficult when you get up here. I wanted to address a couple things. I'm just going to throw some darts because I wrote down some notes. Some of them have been covered. Some of them need to be addressed. Greg's football career did not go well. He had terrible asthma. And I remember we were at one of the games and he had an asthma attack and had to get pulled out of the game. Whether that was an excuse or what, I don't know. I went to go meet him in the locker room and he's just standing there. And I'm like thinking, what's wrong with this guy? And he's big old smile. And I go, put some clothes on. He's standing there buck naked. And he's like, what? I had to change. And he's just laughing. And I'm like, that's so Greg. But I'll get to my notes, but a couple things, we're all real, been impressed with Greg and he's been great. And so my kids, of course, picked up on that and, real impressed with Greg. And, I want some of that. And I go, hey, man, this guy's, it's like, life's not that easy. So I'd say just ask him, call him up. He'll tell you what to do. And he just said that he's had some great mentors. And so I just wanted to mention that because I know that they were there for him. But I feel like that's what he was setting himself up for. And I feel robbed of that. So I just thought that needed to be said. Another thing I wanted to mention that was really weird was we were in Vegas on vacation with Jim, and we're on the escalator at the MGM, and he's wearing flip-flops, and it folds under, and he slices open his toe, and we had to go to the hospital and almost ruined our Vegas trip. So I don't know what it is with the Jaggers and wearing flip-flops in the most inappropriate places, but so I know he had, obviously touched a lot of lives, and everybody, if you wouldn't be in this room if you didn't touch your life. But he would frequently talk about, he kind of had like, some of the boys he grew up with, at church that he really loved. We spent a lot of time with him growing up. And so he's really close to his family and us as his cousins. And he was lived in Sacramento, and we lived, which back then in the 80s seemed like a whole different planet away out in Wilton in the country. And he was like deep in Sacramento, and it was like, these are city guys. And he would always be talking about, Rick and Leonard and all this stuff. And that was like his buddies. And then he would come out there and he was like a totally different person. And it was like, he would meet you wherever you were and be on your level, which is a skill to do, to not just kind of, it never seemed, it was always genuine, he was always right there. And I don't know why I remember this either, but we were out at the house in Wilton, and we were expecting him to come out. And honestly, I don't remember if it was just Jim coming out or Greg, but I heard, I'm in my room, and we're like 100 yards off the main road, and I hear this bang, 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 bang. And I'm like, man, what could that be? I look out the window, and here comes Rick driving this BMW with these bass speakers rattled in the windows. And I get out there, and I'm like, what is going on? Like they were there to make a rap video or something. They get out, and Jim, they're all dressed in velour troop sweatsuits with gold chains. And I'm like, man, do you guys even know where you're at? Like, what is going on? But some things just stuck with me. I don't know why. But I guess I'll get to, so this is my notes. I should have introduced myself. I don't know if I did. I'm Darren Hall. I'm another cousin, Jason's brother. This is my wife, Jennifer. And I'll just skim over this. Most of this has been said, but it is an honor to be here. It's great to see everyone, and it's obviously packed, like I said, because he's made an impression on all of you. And we all knew different parts of Greg, whether he was your boss or just a coworker or a family or a cousin or a brother, whatever your role was. he spent a lot of our time at our house when we were young, growing up. And he wasn't afraid to take risks as a kid. And he was wild. And we knew when Greg came out there, something was going to happen. And, whether we were digging fence post holes or baling hay or whatever, he was excited about the adventure. And for us, it was just like unappreciated work. And he loved it. He loved it. And I think, not that we can take all the credit, but this is where Greg, I think, did, begin his love for the outdoors. He spent a lot of time fishing in our pond and riding dirt bikes, learned how to shoot guns. He'd patrol our property with a BB gun. Like, I don't know what he was doing. And I think it's the first time he probably saw a horse or a cow or a chicken or a goat. And by the way, we thought our goat was a dog for a couple of years. A lot of great memories of him spending a lot of his free time at our house. And I'll just go over a couple of those. I know, like I said, he spent a lot of time fishing in our pond, and we would get on bikes. This is in the 80s where you got on your bike and just took off for hours and hours. And not that our parents weren't good, but they didn't know what we were doing. They didn't check in. We couldn't call them. We were just gone. And there was this weird, like, mobile home nudist colony thing out there. And when you went on bike rides, sometimes you'd end up over that way. But we were fishing, and we would get back with these fish, and they'd been banging into the bike spokes for so long, there was no fish left. And Greg would just laugh and laugh and think that was the funniest thing ever. We did things in the 80s that you really don't do now. We had this huge weeping willow tree in the back of our property, and it was your typical country property, piles of metal and wood with nails and everything, and we would climb that tree all day and goof around. And for whatever reason, he decided to jump out of that tree like he was on the top ropes of some wrestler, like he was a wrestler or something, and landed on wood, impaled himself with nail in the knee that bothered him for a long time. Another time, somehow we ended up with the smoke bombs out there, and him and Jason were throwing lit ones at each other and caught the grass on fire and almost burned the whole barn down. And Greg also got hurt trying to climb our chain link dog kennel to get on the roof of our garage, I think to shoot a bow and arrow or something. And I guess Jason was telling me one of the stories is that when they were way too old to take naps, probably inappropriately, maybe mom and dad needed a break or something. They shoved them in a couple of different rooms to separate them and tell them to take a nap. And apparently a hole turned up between the walls so they could talk back and forth to each other. And then another time he convinced, by taunting my older brother Ken, to throw a rock, ended up going through the window of the barn, breaking that, and that window stayed broken. I think the rest of the time we lived there. And then I guess one of Greg's favorite memories is when he convinced Jason to shoot me out of the cherry plum tree with a slingshot. And I fell out of that tree like I was a, stuntman from the 80s or something. So I guess Greg loved that story. And then the last one is just kind of on a personal thing. And again, just about him being generous. And I mean, on the surface, it's really not a big deal. But I had just started my career in law enforcement, and he bought me a knife for work that all cops seem to wear. I don't know exactly why. I don't know what I was going to do with a knife, but it had a couple of extra little things that it did. And I said, Greg, I don't think this is even illegal in California. Where'd you get this? And he's like, oh, you'll be fine. Don't worry about it. So I had opened it up, and it had my name engraved on there. And so I wore that knife every shift for 25 years. And again, it wasn't really necessarily about the knife. It was just Greg saying that he was proud of me and he approved, and just to be safe. So he made a great impression on all our lives, I think, especially me and our family. And that's really it. Did you have anything you wanted to say? She was assigned to speak as well. All
No,
right.
I don't have anything else to say except that, the same thing. He was so generous. One time I remember I met Greg in high school. That's how long we've been together. And so I didn't know him the early years, but I knew him as a teenager more. And he was still mischievous, probably more. And just teased me relentlessly for the whole time we saw him. But you knew you were loved for sure. So, and then just more generosity is he called Darren up one time, and I don't know the specifics because I don't know anything about guns, but he said, I have some guns for your boys. And we said, okay, well, that is awesome, but you sure you want to give us guns? And sure enough, he, because he knew our boys would love them. So just, that's it.
Well, you're going to hear the stories over and over again because that is kind of what I want to tell you about. I'm Greg's mom, and his dad is there. And we wrote this little information about Greg from our perspective. And I hope you'll bear with me as I read it because a lot is what you've heard already. Greg was born in 71, as you know, and his brother was 19 months old when Greg came along, and they were a handful. In the early years, like Jason and Darren talked about, we lived very close to my sister, and we're best friends, and we spent all of our time together because how do you deal with 4 kids under, little young kids? They were a lot. And our husbands worked and worked. Under 2. And they worked really hard. Jim went to school and he worked a full-time job. And so they were never home. So Sydney and I would do our work and then we would spend time together. And that just gave those cousins so much time to learn to love one another and to cause a lot of trouble. In 73, Sid and Cal and the Halls, they moved to Wilton on 11 acres. And we, in 74, moved to Modesto. So every weekend, we would get in the car and we would go to Sid's. And I'm sure she was like, oh, they're coming because it's going to be trouble. But we spent so much time together and Greg loved it there. And I think that, just like Jason said, is where he learned to love the outdoors. In 79, we moved back to Sacramento from Modesto. And Greg played soccer, and he played t-ball, and he played Little League. But he really wasn't into any of it. He was kind of the flower picker in the back, and he didn't really enjoy it. He was never really a fan. But one year, Greg was expected to sell a box of chocolates, chocolate bars. And so when I was cleaning his room, we found all of the wrappers under his bed. He took painting classes, and at high school he did carving. And he did a great job and enjoyed it, and he was really good at it. Just before his 12th birthday, I came home from work, and the driveway was here, and then there was the garbage cans on the side, and there was a fire there. I got out of my car, took care of the fire, walked into the house, and Greg was the only one home, but he had absolutely no idea how that fire started. Then that year, he asked us for a chemistry set. Needless to say, he did not get a chemistry set. He mentioned it many times over the years. So when he turned 50, we bought him a chemistry set. In his teen years, his uncle would take those kids and they would go hunting. One day he asked his dad if he would take him to a hunter safety course. Personally, from the mom perspective, I thought there's no way that kid's going to pass that class. But Jim took him. He passed with flying colors, and that was all preparing him for his love of hunting. He loved being at his cousin's house, and now I can understand why. And spent as much, he would spend as much time as he could there. And he also was a great lover of his grandparents. And he spent a lot of time with them. He, of course, at Grandma's, he would get a lot of fine dining, and he would get visits to Lake Tahoe during the summer. So he had a really good time. And one day we were at the grocery store, and he asked me what we were having for dinner. And I told him we were having spaghetti. And he said, "Oh, I don't like spaghetti." And so I promptly told him that if his dad, who worked to support us, could eat spaghetti, then I think he could too. And then came high school. He wanted, like they talked about, he wanted to play football. Yes, he had terrible asthma, but also that jump from the willow tree ended up with the nail in his knee, which resulted in surgery and was a problem. His knee would always swell. So that was the end of his football. Out of high school and just entering college, a friend of ours came over and explained that a friend of his was opening a non-public school, and that was Alicante. And they needed a couple of strong guys to work in their behavioral management, is how I remembered it. And that was where Greg's love of working with the youth started. The rest is history. It's been a true honor to be his parents. And watching him develop into this great man who, together with his great wife, accomplished extraordinary things. Until we meet again, we will find peace knowing that he's with Ben and all those that came before him and all those that will come after. Love, Mom and Dad.
Hi, my name is Bernie Martinez, and this is my son, Hayden, not to be confused with Tracy, who's my wife and is related to Mike and Rhonda. And we're just up here representing the Martinez and Anderson family, and we just wanted to, share a few memories and about Greg and what he meant to us. And one of the downfalls of going near the end is that you get to hear a lot of the stories I was going to share. Like Mike shared the Disneyland story about the Jiffy Pop. That's what I was going to lead it off with, but that's taken away. But what I learned on that Disneyland trip was that Greg and Rhonda got married in 2003. This Disneyland trip happened in 2006. And I was just saying, that's my first real memory of Greg, was that Disneyland trip, because I found somebody that had the same sense of humor that I had and told it like it was. And he was my kindred spirit ever since then. That's my first real memory of Greg. Another favorite memory of mine is, have you ever heard him say, if you know whether a shirt or a top is too short for you, the way you know, you go, freeze. And if your belly falls out, you know the shirt's too small, don't buy it. So that always sticks in my mind. And anytime I go to the store, I do the freeze test to make sure my stomach isn't hanging out. So that's one of my favorite things. Another thing that I think about Greg is he was a big foodie, which wasn't, especially with Mexican food. And I can just remember we always talked about going to this Mexican food restaurant in San Diego underneath the Coronado Bridge. It's called Cuatro Mipas, or sometimes slang-wise, just Naughties. And I just remember when I took him there, just the smile on his face, having lunch with myself and Hayden. And I have a picture of it. That was when Hayden was going through his beanie stage. And I just, that never goes away. Another time I think about, story-wise, is unique, was we did the Porsche experience down in Long Beach, California. And I had up to 5 slots, and Greg was one of the people I thought about immediately because I know he would not be afraid to push those cars to the limit. And sure enough, they stuck him in a top-of-the-line Turbo S, and he had the driving instructor holding on for dear life. Greg was not afraid to push that car to the limit, as opposed to me. I was a little bit more cautious. That stands out, and just having the dinner afterwards and just sharing the memories of just the whole experience, and I was glad he got to spend those 5 hours with us during that time. And one of the last memories was back last year, March. Rhonda and I the same birthday, and we happened to be up there not only to celebrate our birthdays, right, but to also go to a charity event at Jackson Hole. And what I just remember most about that was going on the sleigh ride, and him breaking out the 20-year-old Pappy Van Winkle, which is, if you guys don't know about whiskey, that's a very, very expensive bottle. And he finally opened it up, and Jim and I and Greg got to partake in it. To go along with these 2.5-inch porterhouse steaks that we cooked out there on the open fire. But the thing I remember most about that trip was flying out to the ranch from where they lived in Alpine and being scared for my life. I'm not sure. Is Carrie in here? Carrie was the helicopter pilot / home builder for Greg and Rhonda, and we were to drive out to the ranch would have been about 3 hours. And so, but on a helicopter, only half an hour. And so it's lightly snowing. I jump up in the back seat, Greg and Carrie in the front. And on the way out to the ranch, we come across some coyotes. Carrie goes, "Hey, let's go down there and mess around with these coyotes." And Greg says, "Yeah, that sounds like a great idea." And I'm being quiet back there. I'm not going to scream like a little boy back here right now. And so we bank down and we get down there. We're probably no more, I don't know, Carrie would know, but it felt like we're only about 10 feet off the top. And Carrie's throwing down rotor wash on these coyotes and just making them run all over the place. Him and Carrie are laughing it up. I'm back there with one hand up on my ceiling, the other hand on the door, and I'm not saying a word. And I'm scared out of my mind. And this is just right after Kobe Bryant. I'm just like, my wife is going to kill me if they don't kill me. If I don't make it home, just get us to the ranch safely. But once we got up to the ranch and we flew over there, just coming across elk and moose and deer, and we finally landed at the ranch, and I saw what it was all about for Greg. It was just, it really just struck me how beautiful it was and what he was building out there. And then I turned to him and says, "I'd like to come up here for a summer, and just for a month. I'm retired from the fire department, so I had the time. And I'd like to bring my son up and work the ranch." And it didn't, that just was last July we were supposed to go. It didn't come to fruition because facilities weren't ready, but it's just that trip really meant a lot. And I just wanted to share that. Some of the other thoughts I have on Greg, as many people mentioned, his generosity, not only with his resources, but with, more importantly, his time. I know he showed up, for Tracy's 30th and 40th. When we invited him, we had a great time up in Malibu. 40th, he flew down. We hosted at our house. He showed up to Hayden's graduation, his gaming championship in Hawaii last year. We had a great time. Again, the portion experience. And something that just stands out for me with his generosity is that he bought laptops for my son and cousins to get through the school year, and without even being asked, he just did it. And it meant a lot to me that he would think of my son as one of his own, and it just meant a lot. Another thing I think about Greg is him being adventurous. See Robert's in the room. He used to love going hunting with Robert, and I used to love looking out the pictures that he would share on his hunting trips. A little quote that just sticks out in my mind for the adventurous is something when I think about Greg is, don't be afraid of death. Be afraid of an unlived life. You don't have to live forever. You just have to live. And that's what I thought about Greg. He lived life. Maybe it wasn't as long as we thought, but you think about the length, but what about the width of this life that he lived? And he lived quite the life. He was funny. He always kept us in stitches, just like I mentioned, the freezing. He was great at telling stories. I think about Leonard. I don't see Leonard in here right now, but man, there's certain people that can just tell stories, and Greg could tell a story like no other. And I just think about this time he was telling us when he went down to the beach cabin, and Leonard was there, and they're up on top of the roof, and my father-in-law wanted to get there. And my father-in-law's wasn't a little guy. He probably weighed about 250 and was about 6'2". And just the way that Greg described how Leonard just picked up my father-in-law by the pants and brought him up onto the roof, I can't even do it justice. Just Greg could tell a story like no other. Another thing I think about Greg is he loved his family and friends. He always made time to spend quality time with his family and friends. He loved his dogs, that's for sure. Maybe the dogs didn't love us so much. You had to really watch your limbs and fingers around his dogs, because I'm not sure if you knew about Greg and his dogs. From Dizzy was probably the best dog. Tika, if I'm saying that right, hit or miss. And Katie, definitely you had to be really careful around. But they were all very loyal to Greg. I was always afraid whenever we went over to Wyoming to walk around their house at nighttime because these dogs were trained killers. And not only that, am I a stranger in the house? I'm brown on top of it, and these dogs, I don't know where they're going to go, so I would just fill up my water down in the bathroom and not leave my room until daylight popped open. Another thing I think about Greg is just created, a legacy of just love and, for the family, and just financially too, to support for generations to come. And the last, again, I just want to, and it's going to lead into my son here, is just that the way he treated Hayden, just like one of his own. And with that, I'm going to give it over to my son.
Okay, hi everybody. My name's Hayden. I'm Bernie's son, but I'm also related to Greg, kind of like a pseudo nephew. I don't really know how to describe myself in relation to him. He would call me big guy a lot, so I began to think that was a family title as well, just like in relation to somebody, like I can call him big guy or something, and that's like makes you related to somebody. But as my dad was saying, he treated me like a son, and I don't know, that was really, really important for me and just like my upbringing. And it's been really helpful today, just hearing all the stories that everybody's been able to share. And just because I kind of see a lot of Greg bleed into who I am becoming as a person and the way that I choose to live my life and my philosophy surrounding it as well. I think of the time that he invited me out to Wyoming in 2021 with the Friesens. And I mean, that was just so special to be able to accompany them and for him to have me in his mind as well, to be able to go out with them. I know they were thinking about me and even got a cardboard cutout at Grayson and Vanessa's wedding as well. And just like, we should bring Matt on the plane and take him there with us because I couldn't go in person. So he was always thinking about me, even as my dad had mentioned that world championship thing that I had done in Hawaii last year. It's a little unclear if that's more for the trip to Hawaii or if it was for me. I'm not entirely sure about that one. But I think when thinking about Greg, it's kind of hard. And I think this was used at the burial today, where kind of felt cheated or unfair that he didn't get to live a life to the typical length that I guess that one would expect, right? And yeah, I feel a little bit cheated, especially given that a lot of that time spent with him was in my adolescence. and that I'm not able to remember a lot of these memories, or memories maybe aren't most readily available in my mind to consider him. But we may not always remember the way that, or we may not always remember memories or specific instances of Greg, but I think we'll always remember the way that somebody makes you feel, and especially I feel that way with Greg as well. Just everybody coming up here today saying how loving that he was, how generous he was with his time, and just his energy and always showing up for you. I think I was speaking with Cole as well yesterday, and he had mentioned just kind of how witty of a person Greg was, and how despite all of these shenanigans and everything, he never made you feel bad about yourself. It was always lighthearted, and it was always good fun. And I don't think anytime he made fun of me, I don't think I ever really felt bad about it, because it was great. He was also kind of like an amusement, coupling with that point of wittiness as well. It was just so interesting sometimes just hearing the things that he would say. And I kind of just remember thinking like, wow, I can live my life and be a person that I want to be. And I don't really have to, I guess, fall into a block or live to other people's expectations. I can be my own person. And I think growing up in adolescence, like I said, that was very unfortunate that I guess I don't get to live a lot of my life with him and be able to experience a lot of the things that I think I would have enjoyed as I begin to grow older. But I think at the point in my life that I knew Greg, it was really helpful in just shaping myself and just knowing that I could be anybody and I could set out to do the things that I want to do. So yeah, that's kind of what I end on. I hand it back to my dad.
And then just one more last thing, just in closing. I'm going to paraphrase this other quote that I saw that I think about Greg and how helps me get through this is, it's this. At times like this, there's not a lot that words can do to help ease our pain and sense of loss. And though it may be hard to believe it right now, know that that pain will ease with time, and we will look back at the memories of Greg and smile and remember a life well lived and loved, because that's who Greg was, and that's how he will continue to live in our life, is by sharing these stories. And I hope you do take the time to go video and share stories so we could look back and know some stuff about Greg that maybe we didn't know about, or something funny. And that's how he'll continue to live in our hearts. Thank you for your time.
I'm Jim Jaggers. I'm Greg's brother. And I got to tell you, as I sat here today and listened to the various stories and thoughts of my brother, brought me back to a time when I was about, I don't know, maybe I was 10 or 11 years old, but I was at church. I was assigned to give a talk. At the time, there was a kind of a book for kids, you know, to give like a 2-minute talk out of it. And sitting up on the stand, I'm looking down at my dad, and this other youth speaker, a girl, gets up. She starts to give my talk. So I had to pivot. I had to think of something to do. And it all worked out okay. So it's going to work out okay today, too. I think there's a few different things I want to talk about, but first thing I want to talk about is our family. And as I came here today and I thought about my grandma who worked here, and thought about as I was getting dressed today, you know, what I was going to wear. And I wore this tie to Ben's funeral. And I had a watch on that my grandpa wore that is the stupidest, $2 watch. The man had millions and millions of dollars, and I've got a $2 watch on, maybe it's $2. And we're so blessed that Rochelle and Rhonda have on rings from our grandmother. So I think about how lucky we are to have a family how lucky we are to have people that have gone before us. They're on the other side, there to meet my brother and to bring him home. I have a few stories to tell. If you might imagine, there might be a few that you guys haven't heard. So I got to be honest with you. Sometimes these stories are going to mix together. They're not going to necessarily be about my brother. They're going to be about us. And that's how it's going to be. So as you guys have learned, my brother likes to, be outdoors. I don't care about the outdoors. I do not want to camp. A 3-star, maybe a 4-star hotel is camping to me. God bless Greg for being willing to do both things, which, by the way, we got from Grandma. So my brother had a snake. It was a gardener snake, right? And so he brings this snake home, and I'm like, don't bring that snake around me. I do not like snakes. So, of course, my mom and dad are gone, and my brother thinks he's going to terrorize me with the snake, right? So I caused a commotion, slammed the door, that snake bit him. So he got exactly what I'd come to. Another time when my parents were gone, a BB gun shot the window in the big, remember the walnut, that big glass. And then another time, the door was, I'm not sure what my brother was doing, but he had the sliding glass door like partially open, like maybe like this amount. And he shot his bow. Well, the bow broke. So the bow smashed the window and broke. Now, remember, I don't know, maybe we're 10, 11 years old or something like that. Maybe a little bit older, but the adults in the room realize that, those things shatter, right? They're meant to do that. So this thing goes in 3,000 pieces, and you're kind of like, hey, we got by with the BB gun, like said that wasn't us, but like this ain't gonna work. Like this, they're gonna know about this one for sure. Another thing that we used to do is my parents had a big freezer, like a chest freezer, I guess. And they're like 5 foot high, 4 foot high. Probably 5 foot's probably stretching it, but they're 4 foot high, 6 foot long, something like that. So what we would do is we take turns. We get a jacket, and then we get in there, and then the other one just shut the door on the other one. And then we'd you stay in the free. I don't even know what the hell we were doing. We were just, you get maybe it was something to do, I guess. You get in the freezer, and then you'd be like, oh, well, yeah, it's not that cold or whatever. And then, good thing I don't remember there being a key on there. And there probably is a good thing there was no key, because probably somebody would have got locked in there. When our cousins got together, so you guys need to realize, you probably picked up on this, but our cousins are our brothers. And anytime we were together, that meant that there was going to be some trouble. And now, maybe rightly so, but this is the truth. Now, you younger kids, you remember this was the 80s, and it was okay. But my mom and my Aunt Sydney, they would lock us out. And there was no getting in that house. Now, a nap, yeah, they'd bring you in for a nap, which, why do we need a nap? But whatever, and they would make you drink out of the hose. They wouldn't fall for a trick that you needed water. You drink out of the hose, right? So, we would always get, like somehow, some way it would end into some kind of fight. And so that would usually be Kenny and I versus Greg and Jason. And then Darren, he was the youngest. So then he was kind of the wild card, like where he was going to fall. But usually what happened is Darren took the brunt of the action. Like as an example, we would start off with a dirt clod fight. literally, you got some dirt clods laying around, right? And just start throwing the dirt clods. Well, pretty soon somebody get hit and then there'd be a rock come out. And then the rock would start flying and then somebody get hit with the rock and that would usually be Darren. And then we'd have to tell Darren, like, you need to shut up and you just need to stay down. Like you can't, because we're going to get in trouble if you go back to the house. You're not going back to the house. You're staying right here. I read one time that actually that the youngest son is the most successful athlete because he's generally been beat up on by the older ones. So Darren. I remember another time we're at our house and we have wagons and we started having a demolition derby with the wagons. And like we take the wagons, like you'd have the, these were metal wagons, not plastic like you kids had, but, and you'd have to fix up on them, oil them up and do all this stuff, but you have the handle and you just run them at each other. So somebody be in there and then the others be pushing and you go full tilt and bang, it was a lot of fun. My mom mentioned a little bit about Lake Tahoe, and our grandparents first had a house in Incline over off of Harold, on Harold actually, over by the golf course. And then they bought a lot up over what they used to call Mount Rose Highway and built a big house. And so we would spend a lot of summers up there and in winters. And I always remember when we were up there in the wintertime, we would always pray for the snow to come. So you get snowed in and then you'd have to go home, go to school, During the summer, obviously, school was out. But I remember so many times where my brother and I, the lot, it was a court and the street was straight and then it dropped down. And so it was perfect for sledding because you could just, take off and go and end up down there. But we would go all over the place and go off the side of hills and things like that. And I remember in the summertime, grandparents would drop us off at the beach. So at Incline, for those who don't know, there's basically the homeowner association has a couple of private beaches. And one of them has a pool and a snack bar and stuff. And so, they would just drive in, drop us off, say, see you later, and we'd be to our own devices all day long. Grandpa come back and bring us some sandwiches or maybe barbecue once in a while, but we did all kinds of different stuff. I remember we would, there's a pier it's of rock and dirt and grass. And we would get down in there and we would catch crawdads. And that was kind of a thing. I don't know what, we didn't ever do anything with the crawdads. We didn't eat them. It wasn't like New Orleans, but we would catch a whole bunch of crawdads and just, get sunburn, no suntan lotion or nothing. So we always had just a lot of great memories. Not all that I can remember, but I guess thankfully a lot more than what I can remember. Besides, you guys don't want to hear all of them today anyhow. The unique thing about my brother is we've lived very parallel lives. Heard a story from Mike about my brother's flip-flop and, my little flip-flop thing, which is true. I'm glad you remember that, Darren, because I didn't, as soon as he brought that up, I was thinking about that. I almost wanted to shout that out. That happened to me. And what's worse is that as you that go to Vegas know or been to Vegas, you freaking walk all over the place. And I got this tore up toe and we're going to the NASCAR race on that Sunday, and I was walking all over, but that sucked. I'll say that. And we had a lot of fun, but that sucked. So it was kind of funny that I had made a note for myself that I want to talk about these parallel lives. One of those parallel lives that we're both very lucky to have had and will always have is our wives. So no disrespect to anybody, but unlike my parents, who married, are still together and happy. It didn't work out that way for my brother and I. But just to give you a little bit of the parallel, we both married someone older than us and a speech therapist. Now, how can you make that up? Right? Sure, when I put that note down, I had some other things about parallel, but I think you get the idea with that. I had the privilege to spend the last few days with my brother. I sat there and I watched him. I watched him struggle. I was with my grandpa when he died in the last week or two of his life. And I thought about how with my grandpa, he was over 90 years old. He lived way past his life expectancy when he was born. And I laid there and watched my brother. And I know what he was doing. I know exactly what he was doing. He did not want to leave here. And I know specifically he did not want to leave here because he did not want to leave Rhonda. And I know that he gave everything that he had to stay here for as long as he could. And I don't say that as a downer. Life is eternal. There is something beyond this. We will be together again. We have families, we have friends. We have a whole bunch of stuff to do and to make. And it wouldn't have mattered if he died at 90 or 100 or 2 days before he died. There would still have been more that he would have wanted to do and accomplish. And I want each and all of you in this room today to remember that you have a privilege. That privilege is here. Your story is not complete. If you have something that you want to change it. If you have something you want to do it. This is your time. You don't know how long you're going to be here. You know how many people you're going to get to love or be with, or dinners, or family times. But my message to you is to do it. Thank you.
Hi, we're Rick and Melissa Bassinelli. We've been friends with Rhonda and Greg for many, many years. There is family that you are born with, and there's the family you choose. Rick and I are grateful and proud to have been longstanding members consisting of a family of 4, Rick, Greg, Rhonda, and myself, who choose each other every single day. Our history in this chosen family, it runs deep. Rick met Greg and his brother Jim, who became fast friends when he moved into Greg and Jim's neighborhood when he was in the 4th grade. I became friends with both Greg and Rhonda when I was an undergrad and college serving as a social work intern at Alicante School. I also met this guy right beside me too. It has been an honor to grow as individuals, friends, couples, parents, and professionals together. We've heard so many stories today, and when I think about ours, we have decades of stories and memories that we've collected over the years. And I think, as some have mentioned, it's these tiny moments, I call them micro moments, that you hold almost so special in your heart, and they're almost hard to communicate. So we're going to do our best to share some micro moments that we've had with Greg that really help illustrate the amazing and wonderful man that we celebrate today. Greg was always there for us and with us as a problem solver and a partner in adventure. I don't think Greg ever saw a problem or a challenge that he didn't think he could solve. I don't know how many people in this room heard him say, you know what, I think you should WikiHow that. Anyone heard that? And I'm going to tell you what, I've never seen him look up anything on WikiHow, okay? But I'm going to tell you about something that we probably should have WikiHow'd before we did it together. So Rick and I had just moved into a home. This is 2020. And this home had a lot of updating to do inside. And so one of the things that was on my list was to tackle a chandelier that was in the entryway. That chandelier was the ceiling was 30 feet high. And we were also having painting done at the house. And so I had Restoration Hardware style on a Wayfair budget. So I ordered a chandelier that was about 3.5 feet globe, and it was a crystal chandelier. It came in hundreds of pieces, and we invited Greg and Rhonda to come over for dinner. And I was like, hey, Rhonda, want to do a puzzle? And it was this chandelier. And so Rhonda and I put together this crystal chandelier. We had scaffolding already in our house because we had painters in there. And so Greg was like, you know what? I think we can just hang this chandelier tonight. You've already got the scaffolding in your house. And we're like, it doesn't even reach that high. And he's like, yeah, but we can put a ladder on top of that scaffolding. So we get the 2 stories worth of scaffolding. We pull a ladder out of the garage. We plop it up there. Rhonda and I piece together the chandelier.
It's not me. I didn't do it. That's terrible.
Okay. Rhonda and I pieced together the chandelier, and Greg and Rick moved together to get that ladder on top of the scaffolding. And let me tell you what, this guy, he was really supportive from the ground, okay? So we get the ladder up on top, and then we're trying to figure out, how do we get this 55-pound chandelier up? And Greg's like, well, why don't you get a rope on it, and you can kind of pull it up, or I can pull it up by the chain if I can just get top of that ladder. So Greg climbs up the scaffolding. He gets on top of the ladder. Rick is a very supportive friend standing, holding the scaffolding from the ground. And Rhonda and I are kind of watching, helping get up the chandelier. And as Greg is pulling up the chandelier, by the way, it's a crystal chandelier, all these crystals start flying that Rhonda and I so carefully put onto the chandelier. Greg gets it up there. Amazingly, he gets it into the ceiling, and I don't know, maybe it's not going to fall down. He starts wiring it all together, and then we flick on the switch, and it does not turn on. We never got it on. We did not WikiHow it. Instead, we called an electrician to come out the following day. But Greg always thought that anything was possible. He always thought, like, a problem, we could do it ourselves. And he was the only one crazy enough to agree to go on top of 2 stories of scaffolding and a ladder, the tip top of a ladder, for a house that wasn't even his. We traveled together so much. We were, and it was near and far, and it was in search of great food, great memories, beautiful art, and amazing experiences. We also roped Greg into several different adventures that were not of his choosing. One of them was Disneyland, and he does not consider that to be the happiest place on earth, by the way. Rhonda and I had a great time. Rick had a good time, but Greg, he tolerated it with us. We also roped him into a hot air balloon expo that was in Reno. We didn't realize that you have to get up at 3:30 in the morning to go see it before it launches. Greg also was not exactly crazy about getting up that early, and there's no coffee shops, by the way, that are open. And if you know Greg, coffee is very, very important. But he did that with us anyways. And then many people talked about Greg's athleticism or lack thereof. We've done a lot of things together. Kayaking, I'll tell you, there's not a single kayaking adventure where Greg probably hasn't gotten into some kind of shenanigans. He runs into bushes. He's in whitewater and water's coming up over him. He took a stab at paddleboarding, and someone in my family I know has video of Greg paddleboarding. He didn't really paddleboard, honestly. He tried to stand up, and if you could ever see someone slow-mo fall, that was Greg slow-mo falling off the paddleboard. He was not very good at it. But he was up for anything, and that was the amazing thing of Greg. Greg was a people-centered person. He was a connector and a bridge builder. And this often involved humor, and it always involved empathy.
Did you go off track here?
Nope.
Okay, I get 2 work stories. I think Greg would be telling me right now, he'd be giving me the signal like, hey, this is going long, so we'll go quick. This might encapsulate Greg at work. There's so many stories. There's very basic ones that I'm giving. But we shared an office at the beginning of Point Quest. It was Greg, Rhonda, and myself. And we were I did the intakes in there with new students. And we had a mother in with a son. It was a large mother. And I didn't have a phone at my desk yet. Gary didn't do the wiring for it yet. So I pulled Greg's phone over to my desk, and the phone cords were going across the, kind of hanging over the ground a little bit. We're talking to this mother, and Ron and I are explaining the program. Greg comes rolling in, and he tripped over the phone cord. He didn't see it. He landed into the lady that was sitting facing him, 2 hands into the chest, and his nose in the crotch. It didn't faze him. He jumped up from there and he says, "Hi, I'm Greg. Nice to meet you." And I'll tell you, we were very successful with that family. Believe it or not. And the second one I'll tell you, and again, just basic stories, but we had a parent that was very upset. We couldn't communicate with her. She didn't speak English. We didn't speak Mandarin or Chinese. I don't remember which one it was, but she was very upset. And it was around 3:30 in the afternoon. Many of the people were gone. So we went to the conference room, and Rhonda said, "Come with me now." And so I came out. Greg's in there alone with her. And she said, "We need to get a hold of a translator. So call the district, see if you can get a translator." So I'm looking for a calling. No one's available. It's too late in the day. So we walked back in there. It probably was about 10 minutes. And Greg and her were not really hugging, but he had his arm around her and he's rubbing her back, and she was laughing and smiling. And I said, "What in the world what did you do?" He said, "Bassanelli, we came to an understanding." I'm like, "How?" He never really told me exactly how he did that. But we heard a lot of stories of what a communicator he was. And I know we're going off track. I didn't prepare this, Melissa prepared this, but I will say this, he got me the job at Alicante School, non-public school. He was 19 years old. And he told me, this was before Melissa, before Rhonda, he told me, "You know what, Bassanelli, we're going to do this ourselves." And I said, "Yeah, right." And, I was a big naysayer. I said, "How are we going to do that? Your dad works at the post office. My dad sells cars. Yes, Grandpa Reitman has a lot of money, but he's not going to give it to you." And he said, "I have a plan." He didn't exactly tell me what the plan was, But I told him all kinds of reasons why it's not going to work. We don't have credentials. He said, you can buy that. He had an answer for everything. You know, you fast forward to where we ended up when he called me and he said, you know, you already heard all the stories. He did mergers and acquisitions, you know, and it was South Point Academy came for sale. Debt market was drying up, which I don't really know anything about the debt market, but you know, anyway. So he called me and said, it's time. We're ready to do it. Rhonda and I are going to start Point Quest at South Point, which South Point didn't, and there's a couple of odds I'll fill this, but South Point didn't have the best reputation, and it was a real pit. And I took a leap of faith with them, and it was the best decision of my life. It wasn't like working. I got to hang out with my friends. There were some wild and crazy times. We didn't have any money in the beginning, and the place needed paint. And so Greg said, we can paint this place. And we got rollers and lots of paint. I think it was 40,000 square feet. And we were going to do this in a weekend. So anyway, we figured out quickly we needed sprayers. And we went 48 hours straight without stopping. I think he spray painted me 4 or 5 times because he had the maturity of a junior high student often. But he assured me that in the future, we won't have to do this anymore. And he told me in the beginning, Bassanelli, we're not going to have to worry about money. It's coming. Well, that took a lot longer than what I first, envisioned. I was like, when is that happening? Well, we didn't forecast the crash and everything else that was happening, but I lost track where we're at. I want to clarify one thing. No gold chains. In the BMW, we had Fila sweatsuits and 2 12-inch Sherwin Vega woofers in the trunk of the BMW. We thought we were cool, and Greg liked that. But no gold chains.
You give an Italian a microphone and he's going to keep going off your script, but it's fine. So as Rick was talking, though, Greg always made you believe that the impossible could be possible, and he also always had your back. For me personally, I have some food allergies, and I always knew that every single restaurant or every single meal, Greg was caring about what I was eating, and particularly if there was something on the menu that I could have because of my food allergies. He always cared about me. For those of you who do know Rick, and he talks really loud, if you know Rick, I think that contributes to some hearing because he's always on speakerphone. He never holds the phone up to his ear. It's always on speaker. But there are so many times that Rick has been on the phone with Greg and they're talking about something or talking about a problem, and I can hear Greg, or my kids can hear Greg ask Rick, well, what does MB think about that? And MB's me. Or what does the boss say? Or you better take care of that before MB gets home. And he's right. You better take care of it before MB goes home. But Greg was always helping think of others in those conversations. And you always felt like he had your back. I think it was probably back in 2008, we were down at Greg and Rhonda's house for a party. I don't really remember what kind of party it was. All of our kids went, and there were a ton of kids at the house. And Johnny was 7 or 8 years old, and he had just gotten he had a Nintendo DS game. I barely know enough about these kinds of things, but it was a microchip card that had about like 50 different games on it, and it had over 100 plus hours of gaming that he had that goes inside this little tiny machine. And so he and the kids all went out to the park that is right by their house. And he took his Nintendo DS and he lost that tiny little card. It was like very, very tiny. He lost it somewhere at the park. And so Johnny came back to the house upset, and he told Rick and Greg, I lost this SD card. And Rick's like, rub some dirt on it, you'll be fine. And Greg stopped what he was doing, and he went back to the park with Johnny, and he looked everywhere through the park for that little tiny card. And then when they didn't find that tiny card in the park, he interrogated every single kid that was at that party to make sure. So then he knew how to look for stuff, hopefully, or he had learned. So he interrogated every single every single kid at that party to see who had this SD card. And the SD card never showed up. But what did show up was that there's a 7-year-old that felt seen and valued and cared for, to where it's like a core memory and for him as a 24-year-old today. And that is Greg. Like, he made you feel like you were the most important person and that he had your back. In the past few months, as Greg was navigating his cancer diagnosis, he believed the seemingly impossible could be possible, that he could overcome this challenge, that he could beat this cancer. And when we talked with him about it, we believed it too, because his belief in positivity was contagious. And you knew that he could do it because it was Greg, and that's what Greg does, is he turns challenges into opportunities. He turns dreams and possibilities into reality. To say that Greg has profoundly shaped our lives, who we are and how we show up for others, doesn't come close to capturing the magnitude of his impact on us. There are so many times that we, Rick and I, ask ourselves, what would Greg, or also Jaggers, as we call him, what would Jaggers do in this situation? And up until now, we have been able to simply ask him, pick up the phone, go see him in person. But moving forward, one foot in front of the other, we hold and reflect on all the moments and memories we have to help us answer that question for ourselves, continuing his legacy and making him proud. There's the family that we are born with and the family that we choose, and we're so grateful to be a part of the family that he chose.
You know, I'll just close it with this. You know, this is a tough time for all of us, of course, and I got to experience a little bit with Greg when we had first started Point Quest. You know, we were a year into it, and Ben passed away. And I didn't know what our future held at that moment. I thought, are we going to continue? You know, what are we going to do? And you know Greg Jaggers. And he was very, you know, saddened, of course, from what happened. But he talked to me really soon after that. And he said, Bassanelli, we got to continue what we started. We're going to continue the mission. We're going to continue to live. I'm going to cherish and loved all the time I had with Ben. I wish I had more. We're going to continue doing what we do and keep helping the business grow, because either you're growing or you're dying, and status quo is never okay. We can honor him by continuing to living our lives that way. And for us Point Quest people, we continue down that path. And I know that's what he would want. I can hear him talking to me constantly in my head, and I think that will always be with me. It's Jagger's voice. I can hear him. Richard, let's wrap this up. It's time to go.
Thank you, everybody, for all your time. We have a slideshow, and then followed by some light food and refreshments out here. Just want to remind you also, if you want to share stories, we would love to hear them. There's a video camera and a microphone just around the corner here. But thank you for all your time. We have a little slideshow, and then we'll go out and just hang out. We have the place till at 5, and you're more than welcome to stay as long as you want.